Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday webinar series, Lunch with the Birds. My name is Amanda Duran. I am the program coordinator for the Ohio Bird Conservation Initiative. And these webinars, as part of our series, are brought to you by our outreach committee. Just a few housekeeping things here as we get started today. If you have any questions for Nicole during her presentation, feel free to enter those in your chat box there on the left. And Nicole will either address those during her talk or at the end of the presentation. If you're having any technical difficulties or problems during the webinar, feel free also to private message me. And you can just do that by clicking at the bottom left corner there where it says send to everyone. You can say send to Amanda Duran, and I will try to help you with any issues you might be having. I'd like to invite you also to attend our webinar coming up next month. This is a rescheduled webinar. It's called The Magic of Recruiting Volunteers. It's scheduled for September 11th, which if you will notice, most of our webinars are usually on the third Wednesday of every month. This one has been moved to the second Wednesday, so take note of that different date there. So to get more information on that webinar and also to register, just go to our website, obcinet.org/lunchwiththebirds. And if anyone here today also know of anyone that's interested in this presentation but wasn't able to attend, please invite them to visit our webpage for a recording of this presentation, which will be available by the end of the week. So with that, I would like to introduce our presenter today. Her name is Nicole Najot. I hope I didn't ruin her name too badly there. Nicole is currently an outdoor education instructor at Heartland Conference Retreat Center. Her previous jobs include working as a zookeeper at Gulf Breeze Zoo in Florida, working as a laboratory technician in a research lab at the Cleveland Clinic Foundation, and working as a seasonal biologist at the Maui Bird Conservation Center in Hawaii. She has a BS in Wildlife Care and Education from Unity College in Maine, and she's currently working on an MA in Zoology through Miami University. So with that, I would like to welcome Nicole, and I'll bring your presentation up here.
All right, sounds good. I will turn on the webcam, so maybe, or maybe not. I don't know, it's not showing. Oh well, anyways. Oh, there it is.
There you are.
Okay. All right, so I'm talking today about using inquiry-based education to teach and learn about birds. My master's program deals a lot with inquiry education, and so it's really you can teach and learn about anything, but we're going to be specific to birds. At any point, you can kind of, replace birds with pretty much anything else. So here we have, what is inquiry? First of all, inquiry is a term that's being thrown around a lot recently. It's something that schools are looking into. All zoos and nature centers and all sorts of things are wanting to put in inquiry. It's like the biggest thing. But a lot of people are a little confused about what inquiry is. It's actually kind of complicated too. According to Schwartz, there are a lot of definitions, and he actually talks about in a paper that he wrote about how there's a lot of different definitions. A lot of people talk about different ways. So if you just look at the word inquiry, according to the dictionary, it's an examination into facts, a request for information, and a systematic investigation that's a matter of public interest. And that's the dictionary, and inquiry-based learning and scientific inquiry is all of that, although, may or may not be the public interest part, but it's also a lot more than the scientific or the dictionary definition. So inquiry-based education expands upon that. It can mean different things to different people. It just kind of depends on how you view inquiry. We actually, in one of my classes for my master's program last semester, I had to write a paper about what inquiry means to me. And it's interesting reading everybody else's paper because everybody's is just a little bit different. But in essence, it's the process of learning by which the learner guides the process through asking questions. It's different from other ways of learning because the learner has the control and the teacher is a facilitator and a supporting role instead of just primarily instructor. The teacher doesn't necessarily have all the answers. Instead, the learner and the teacher discover the answers together, and which is pretty. It's actually a really fun way to learn and a fun way to teach too. It's a big thing right now. Inquiry requires, according to a definition of the National Research Council, it requires that students combine processes and scientific knowledge as they use scientific reasoning and critical thinking to develop their understanding of science. It differs in the scientific method in that it permits the learner to understand the why behind what they're doing instead of just blindly following the scientific steps. And I'll go a little bit more into the benefits of inquiry over just the scientific method and activities and the steps of inquiry a little bit later, but for now I'm just going to want to give you the basic idea of what I mean when I'm talking about inquiry. Before I go into more detail, I do want to explain the importance. So why is it that we are talking about inquiry? First of all, it encourages critical thinking. It's a great way for people to develop those skills of critical thinking. It's a fun way to learn. I think it's really fun to go out there and come up with your own questions and figure them out yourself. It can be fun, and it's really fun watching the other students doing that, because you're learning about what you're interested in, which helps make learning more meaningful, and it provides prime teaching moments. And what I mean by that is that it allows students to ask questions so that you can kind of guide them better to their own learning, and it helps you to teach in many different ways. And then it also puts the teacher and the learner on equal grounds. So it's, you're kind of together investigating something instead of telling a student. For example, I had an experience with this when I was, my master's program is going into different, every summer you go to a different field place. So my first field experience was in Baja, Mexico. And one of my instructors, Jose, he helped me to understand about inquiry by kind of teaching me about inquiry. I had a question about a type of cactus called a cholla, which I don't know if anyone has ever had an experience with a cholla cactus, but they are known as jumping cholla for a specific reason, because they have these barbs on the end of the cactus, and if you just brush by it, it sticks right into your leg. It's almost like the cactus jumps out and attacks you. But I was wondering why. I was wondering why it jumped out. At that point, I didn't know that there were barbs, and so I thought, well, maybe it's like a porcupine quill with the barbs, why they stick in so much. And so I asked Jose, and he said, well, I don't know. That's a good question. Why don't you go figure it out? And so he handed me a magnifying glass, and we went out and looked at the cactus together, and I actually, through that, I discovered a lot of different interesting things about the cactus that I never would have noticed. If it just said yes or no, then I probably, that whole memory would not be there. It would have just, that thought would have just been gone, and so it was kind of, it's a neat way, it's really a fun way to learn, instead of just, yes or no, yes, you're right, no, you're wrong, that sort of thing. And finally, it's important for us in Ohio because it's a big part of the Ohio Revised Science Standards. If anyone is doing programs with public schools, if you can say that you are part of the Ohio Revised curriculum sort of matches theirs, that's a big deal, and they will want to be doing your programs. They'll be fully in place in the 2014-2015 school year, but the schools are currently in the transition process. If you want to, I put in the website there. If you want to go look up those Ohio Revised Science Standards, you can do that. I would encourage everyone that works with public schools to look at those. It kind of gives you an idea of what your schools are looking for, so you can match your program to the curriculum. So now I'm going to go through the basic steps of scientific inquiry and match it to the inquiry standards that it meets. So here is a sheet that I made. This is actually when I teach the students that come to camp about inquiry. This is a little sheet that I give them so that they can see what's going on. Before I kind of do that, I do want to talk, I said I'd talk a little bit about how it's different from the scientific method. If you look, each of the steps are part of the scientific method, more or less, but the difference is in that, as I said before, the teacher doesn't have the answers. Scientific inquiry likes to engage all of the senses as much as possible. I don't suggest engaging the sense of taste outside, though. You never know, you don't want to stick something in your mouth. You don't want the kids to be eating things. But all the other senses are engaged. The scientific method can focus sometimes so much on the method and the steps that it detracts from the learning of the science. So the students follow all these steps, but they don't understand necessarily why they are following those steps. And finally, scientific inquiry allows a student to feel like they are scientists. One interesting thing that you can do to introduce scientific inquiry beforehand, if you ask students, what is your view of a scientist? What do you picture when you think of a scientist? And a lot of times students will say, you know, test tubes and, you know, crazy guys in lab coats with wild hair, and they'll, you know, describe all these things, but they'd never talk about viewing themselves as a scientist. And scientific inquiry can help the students to understand that, yes, I can be a scientist too. So the first step is observation. The pre-K through grade 4 standards mention observation specifically. The older grade standards don't specifically mention observation, but you know, observation is all a critical part of those, and observation skills are critical for students to have. Before you jump into the inquiry, if you want to provide students opportunities to practice some observations. Remind them again, all the senses except for taste. You know, encourage them to go out and make observations, a couple minutes with their eyes open, a couple minutes with their eyes closed. Ask them what they hear, what they smell, especially birds. A lot of times when you're looking at birds, you don't necessarily see them, but you might hear the birds, and that could inspire some questions. One activity, as I said, find a secluded spot, list out all the observations they make. This is again something that we did on our trips, on our inquiry trips and stuff for my school. Have the students, another observation way, have students study a picture. If you have a really busy picture, then take the picture away, have the students describe what they saw. That's a good way to get their observation skills kind of rolling. And encourage all observations throughout your entire time with the students, not just this part of the lesson. Another part of scientific inquiry, as opposed to the scientific method, is that you don't necessarily have to start at a specific spot in the inquiry. Like we had this whole list of steps, but you don't necessarily have to start at the top step. As you are going through, you might be coming up with another question, and so the inquiry is a lot more flexible. The next one is the comparative question. In order to investigate a question, you have to have a question. All the state standards do talk about questions, about how to ask a question or how to identify questions. So a question is an important part. They compare one thing to another is what a comparative question is. But you don't have to use comparative questions. They're just easier because it sort of limits down the amount of variables. But again, any sort of question that gets the kids thinking that they can investigate is fine. Let's see. Yeah, any question that they have can be converted into a comparative question too. So if they have, you know, they come up with a question, if you want to be specific to comparative questions, you can do an exercise where you have them switch questions up a little bit. So, you know, they can come up with these questions, and then you have them practice, how can I make this into a comparative question? So let's have an example. So far, you have a student that's making observations. She sees you're in a garden. She sees a hummingbird visiting a flower. At first, she wonders what color the hummingbird visits most frequently. So then if you want to convert it into a comparative question and to narrow it down a little, maybe does she visit more red flowers, or does the hummingbird visit more yellow flowers? So the student uses both the current observation and maybe past knowledge to create the question, because she saw hummingbird maybe visiting several different colors of flowers, but maybe she heard in the past that hummingbirds are attracted to red flowers specifically. So she wonders, well, is that something that's true, or is that something that I can, that maybe is like an old wives' tale or something? So she wants to investigate that question. And so that is what, that's like an example of how to switch up the question so it can be comparative. Next is a prediction. Predictions are based on reasoning. I have a little picture of a gypsy with a magic ball. It's not just a random guess. Try to get your students to go into the reasoning. You know, I predict this because it can be based on the observation. It can be based on past knowledge, as long as it's based on something. Be sure to ask the students why they made that prediction. So if they just, I predict the hummingbird will visit more yellow flowers. Okay, well, why do you predict that? So, I already have that written down there. So she saw maybe in our example, she has more birds at the red flowers. So maybe that's why she predicts that. Maybe she predicts it because of the past knowledge. So then you have to, after you have your question, then you have to design your investigation. So let's see, where is that? I'm behind. Okay. So one of the more difficult and time-consuming aspects of inquiry, because it can be sort of hard to design an investigation. Another thing you want to consider are variables. Are they important for your purposes? So that really depends on what you want the students to learn. So if you're going for, if you have older students, you want proper investigations, make sure you talk about variables in that. It's important because it can determine what you learn or what you don't learn or whatever, or how well your inquiry goes could be on variables. If you're younger or your audience is younger and your goal is just to get the students outside and excited about birds, the variables might not be as important. So the comparative questions are also useful. As I said before, they limit the variables by their nature. As first was the hummingbird visiting all the flowers. Now we only have 2 flowers that we have to look at. Does the hummingbird prefer the red flowers or the yellow flowers? And so that gets rid of all the variables that are not red or yellow flowers. Other variables could be weather, the time of day, anything that could affect your results could be a variable that you might want the older students to think about. But the younger students, maybe you don't need the weather, it might not be as necessary. But it could be an interesting thing to talk about towards the end. So the comparative, you can have the class investigate one question together if they can all come up with different questions and then you pick one as a class, or you can split into groups and have each of them conducting their own investigation. So, and both of those have merits. Both of those can be pretty fun for the students as well. Although if you do investigate one question, you might run into students kind of, if you have, especially with younger kids, kind of arguing about which question to do. At that point, that's your role as the instructor to just say, okay, this is what we're going to investigate. So, when you design, you want to know what is your time limit, how long do you have with the students. For where I work, we have an hour for all of our programs with the students. Every once in a while we get 2 hours, but an hour is a little bit constraining, but it is possible. I've done inquiries in less than an hour. Also, what are your materials? In really inquiry, you don't need really high tech or anything really fancy. You can just have whatever you have laying around. So I have some toolkits that you can have. Some useful supplies might be string or flagging if they want to, quarter off an area to investigate in. Measuring tapes or rulers are handy. A stopwatch is really good to have. A lot of investigations, you say you want to time something. Maybe you're looking at birds at feeders. How long does a bird stay at a feeder? Something like that. Paper and pencil is really important. You can have them yourselves provide them or have them bring their own. Binoculars would be really handy for any inquiry involving birds. A calculator, especially with older students, they might want to do some really simple calculations. Other common household supplies, paper clips, magnets. It's amazing what you can do with just random things laying around the house. So when they design the investigation, make sure they are keeping in mind what materials they have, what time limit they have, and their skills. So they don't, if they want to do some sort of big complex investigation, they don't necessarily have the skills to do that or the materials to do that. So next is the gathering of the data part. And this part is kind of the most fun. And here's a picture of me in Peru, where I was on one of my other field expedition trips. We were at a clay lake. and we were helping actually the scientists, but then I also did sort of my own inquiry project based on some of my own personal observations, and that's actually what the background for all of this presentation, that's all from Peru too at the clay lick. There's all the macaws and the parrots and stuff. So all the grade standards do have the gathered data step in some form or another. It's not necessarily, say, gather data, but they all mention that. This part would be good to take up the most amount of time. You want usually as much data as possible, and also it's kind of the most fun part. So a lot of time for this steps. And students are following the procedures they created to find the answers to the questions that they asked. Now, you can have other types of inquiry. If you have a lot of, like, a huge time constraint, you don't have time for the kids to ask questions, you can do other types of inquiry, like a guided inquiry. What I'm talking about here is all open inquiry so far. Guided inquiry is a little bit more, guided. It has the teacher asking the question, or the teacher providing a specific topic that they want to be talking about or investigating. So, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in another slide. So next, you have to interpret the data once you have it. I'll also include this step in the new standards. So interpreting the data is, what does the data mean? Depending on the level of the group and the time, you can bring statistics into it. You don't have to. Statistics can be as simple as finding the averages, right? Or if you have really younger kids, you don't have to. You can just make a chart and have them look at the numbers. That can be a little confusing. Or you can make graphs. If you have a big poster board or a large whiteboard, would be good, that they can just make up a really quick graph. They can put their numbers in or something like that. So we have next, the last step is evaluation and application. So this is, all grade standards also address this step in multiple different ways. It's a really important step. This is the step where the students really learn and they develop their critical thinking skills. They question their own methods, they question their results. You want to have them evaluate their investigation and their results. Many of the times, they will ask, their results will lead to more questions, which is really great, because as they're trying to answer one, they'll come up with another question. They might start talking about their next question. They might start talking about, okay, well, how will we solve that question now? And they'll get really excited about that. You also want to make sure they think about if their results supported their prediction. And make sure they know it's okay if it doesn't. A lot of students get caught up in the, oh man, I was wrong, or they'll try to fix the results so it does match their prediction because they don't want to be wrong. Make sure you stress that it's okay for your prediction to be wrong. That's a perfectly acceptable thing, and that happens in science all the time. So also have them think about what factors could have attributed to the results, even if they didn't design their investigation, to keep variables in mind. This is a part of the inquiry. At this part, you can talk about, well, what could have changed those results. If we had thought about variables, how might that have been different? How might have our results been different? And finally, a huge part of inquiry, as opposed to the scientific method, is that inquiry should be important for real life. Whereas in the scientific method, you have a specific answer you're looking for when you're just doing some sort of science activity in the classroom. You know what the answer is, and your goal is to reach that answer. Whereas with the inquiry, the goal is to learn about your question and figure out how it is, why is it important in real life. And so a lot of times this isn't necessarily, it can be hard for the students to see, well, how does knowing what flower hummingbirds like is important in real life. But if they want to do a feeder or something, you can connect that to real life studies that scientists are doing, any sort of biodiversity study. You can connect it to climate change maybe. There's a lot of connections that you could make with that. So, any sort of question that arose from the investigation and what the next steps of your investigation would be. Also, you can have them think, would it be valuable to get more data on this? Or how could I evolve this, this inquiry. So take the time here to really delve into the process and the variables and the factors. So as the facilitator, it would be your job to try to get the group to think very deeply about what they have just done. So as I mentioned before, this process that I've been talking about has all been open inquiry, which is all a student-led. When you have short amount of time, a guided inquiry might be more practical. I've done both. Students have varying levels of participation in creating an investigation and question in a guided inquiry. So questions can range from, the students investigate whatever they want, to the students have, like they have a specific topic they have to stick to the students are investigating a specific question. So there's all sorts of levels within those three. So, if we're talking about the birds, you can do anything about birds at all. Anything maybe about passerines. Maybe you want to limit to the feeding behavior of passerines. Maybe you want to limit that even more to the food choice of passerines. Maybe if you want a specific question, do they prefer, do passerines prefer sunflower seeds or millet? Or, you can even have a specific type of passerine species if you want. So it can be lots of very broad and lots of student participation in the questioning stage to very narrow. But even with the very narrow, if you have a specific question, you still would probably want the kids to get the observation and the question process. Ask them why they think that you chose that question. Ask them why it's a good question. So get them really thinking about that question in particular, so that it's not just a specific thing. And if you are using the students to do your own scientific inquiry, sorry, for your own research, let them know that they're helping out with your research. Hold on, I need a drink. Sorry about that. So you can actually use the students if you want to do your own research into something and sort of turn it into a type of citizen science type of activity. Sorry. So here's an example of an hour-long class schedule that I have used. Just a brief 5-minute explanation of inquiry, what inquiry is, a brief observation exercise, a few minutes to create their question, and then 5 to 10 minutes to design the investigation. They shouldn't take longer than that. Really, it should be closer to the 5-minute end, especially, I mean, this is just the practice of inquiry if you only have an hour. Inquiry is really best if you have lots of time. If you are like a public school teacher or something and you have a lot of time, you can do an inquiry within a week. That's really ideal, but it is possible to do it in an hour or less. For the hour, 15 minutes to gather data, and then a few minutes to evaluate your data. And then you also want to give a pretty big amount of time to sharing your results and discussing your findings. Sorry, I've been weed eating all day, and it seems like it's catching up with me. Okay, so here's a personal example of how I've been doing inquiry for birds at my work. The bird class that we used to have did not really have a lot of enthusiasm for it. We don't have live birds at our camp that are captive. They'd go over to the bird blind, but they had it was just an observation sheet. They really didn't do much with it. So I added inquiry to it. And it was interesting to see because the students would still go over to the bird blind and they weren't excited really about it at first. But then as they were coming up with questions, and they'd come up with more and more questions, and they grew really, really excited. And even though their inquiry, the whole process of inquiry for them was only about a half hour because there was about a half hour of lecture beforehand, they didn't have a whole lot of time, and they really didn't want to leave the bird blind area. They were really excited about their questions and about finding out the answers. So it really does work when you have students, and those are usually the middle school students that I'm working with for that. Other successes, the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. I'm sure you've all heard of them, all their citizen science stuff. You can put use that for inquiry really easily. The Dragonfly workshops, that's what my school is through. And if anybody is looking for a really awesome master's program, I would suggest looking into that because it's really fun. There's 2 programs. One is called the Global Field Program, which is the one I'm in, where you do 3 field courses each summer. They're about 2 weeks long, and you go to all sorts of different places around the world. Each summer is a different place. There's, I don't know, 10 or 11, something like that, different options of countries to go to. I've been to Baja, Peru, and Mongolia. Mongolia was my latest trip. There's also the Dragonfly workshops. They have something called the Quest model, and that's their model of inquiry. And the Quest is basically the same thing I did. They have it question and observe, uncover comparative questions, explore predictions, start the action plan, and gather data, and then think hard about their findings and share discoveries. And so that's their inquiry process. And there's, like I said earlier, inquiry can mean lots of different things to different people. There's different ways to do inquiry. And so they also have, Dragonfly has a magazine. I don't know if it's still out, but part of our reading assignments for my classes to read some of these magazines. And they have actually students submitting their own inquiries that they have done. And so it's really interesting reading these like almost scientific papers, but written by 3rd graders. And so that's kind of fun to see all the different inquiry projects. And it allows the students, once again, to feel like they are a scientist, like they're contributing something to the bigger picture. So here is just a couple of literature cited that I have, and this is a mappa, a Maui parrotbill bird. It's a chick. It's one that I worked with in Hawaii. So I guess I'm a little bit early to be done, but if anyone has any questions at all, now you can type them.
Thank you, Nicole. That was a great presentation. I really enjoyed it. While some of our attendees here are picking up some questions for you, and again, feel free to enter those in the chat box there on the left. I actually had a question for you. You mentioned the possibility of using some of Cornell Lab's, some of their programs for inquiry, and I was wondering if you could give any examples of what you meant by that.
Oh, sure. Well, one thing that I have done is that the Cornell Lab, especially, they have the different, like the Project Feeder Watches and all those different citizen sciences projects that you can use you can like use those and use that as an inquiry in like a classroom or with a group of students. And then submit it. So they're kind of doing inquiry and citizen science at the same time as they are using the citizen science thing, like say Project Feeder Watch or something. They're doing that data, but they might come up with their own questions as they are working for that citizen science project. Also, the cameras, the Nest cameras that Cornell has that you can watch online. That's another great way that you can have students watch those cameras and come up with different questions and do their own inquiry based on that.
Okay, that's a great idea. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Does anyone else, any of our attendees here have any questions? And while you're thinking of those questions, I wanted to invite everyone to please stay on the line here after I end the webinar and complete just a very brief survey. Give some feedback here to Nicole to help her out and help us out with trying to continue to provide you with quality webinars on a variety of topics. And also, there's an opportunity there for you to offer some suggestions for future webinars that you would like to see. So even if you don't have an idea of who you'd like to have present, but just a topic that interests you, we'd love to hear about that. All right, well, thank you everyone for attending. Thank you so much, Nicole, for the presentation. I really enjoyed it. And again, if you would like to direct anyone, any of your colleagues, to watch the presentation later, it will be available on our website at obcinet.org by the end of the week. So thank you, and I hope that you will all join us for a future webinar next month, September 11th. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.